Welcome to Back in Quarters. I'm Dave Mellon. Before we get started, if you like our content, make sure to like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and hit the notification bell so that you find out every time we add new content. We'd also like to take a second to thank our sponsor for this podcast, Fire Facilities, Inc. Founded in 1989, it's their mission to provide safe, effective, and relevant training to firefighters all around the world. So, to start out for today, I kind of wanted to talk about what this podcast is all about, and then dive into the cardiac arrest with Damar Hamlin that happened on Monday night. This podcast was a brainchild from a couple different conversations that I had with some people. You know, we talked about the fact that we all love the social media content that's being put out there by the fire service. There's some amazing podcasts, some amazing video series, but it's hard for us to get that content in one sitting. And so for myself, I love watching those videos and listening to those podcasts, but if they're an hour, hour and a half, maybe even 2 hours long, I'm spending 3 or 4 episodes of listening before I can get one whole episode of the podcast. So we kind of thought about it. And one of the things that came up was, why don't we put something out there that's a little bit shorter, maybe 15 or 20 minutes for those short drives to work, the quick workouts, the short downtimes that you guys can be able to get some content. So that's kind of the premise of the podcast. That's the direction that we're going to go. It's my hope to be able to do one a week. That's our plan. And it's not always going to be me doing the podcast. There might be a couple guest hosts that pop in from time to time, just due to scheduling. But we're really excited about it. We are really thankful that you guys are taking time to watch this video and listen to this podcast on all of the platforms. But we wanted to talk about the cardiac arrest that happened on Monday night with Damar Hamlin. And specifically, I don't want to get into the medical treatment and things like that, but I do want to talk about the implications with the public. And this is something that I've been dealing with kind of in my inner circle, as well as seeing all the posts on social media. So I was at a friend's house. My friend is a paramedic. His wife is not. She's in education, just like my wife. And the other people that were there were kind of a mix of medical professionals and just civilians. And when this cardiac arrest happened, we all saw Damar get hit, stand back up, and then drop. And immediately my wife yelled over to me. She goes, "Oh my God, did you see that? You know, Damar Hamlin just, passed out." And I looked over and I said, "I don't think he passed out. I think he's having a seizure." And obviously they cut to a commercial. And during the conversation that we were having, all these people in the room that were just civilians had this look of panic in their eyes at what they had just seen. And I remember my friend had looked at me and he goes, "Well, if they're not doing CPR, I guess he's probably okay." And, we kind of had a chuckle and we kept drinking our drinks and eating our food. And then when they came back from commercial break, they said, hey, they've started CPR and they're putting an AED on him. And so as we watched this thing play out, I started to see the panic and the fear in everybody's faces. But I could also look around the room and pick out everybody that was either a medical professional, a police officer, a firefighter, because we were looking at the screen just kind of curious, I guess, as to what was going on. But we didn't have that same fear and that same panic. And then my phone started going off, and it was my mom and my sister and some other close friends. And they're like, "Hey, man, are you seeing this on TV?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm watching it." And they're like, "Holy crap, this guy died on live television on a football field." And I'm like, "Yeah, but it looks like they're running a code." And as the team started to kind of circle around him, it blocked our view from being able to see what they were doing, but we could still tell that they were working him, right? And so then we saw the ambulance come on the field. And as I'm watching and kind of interacting with some of the other people, what I found was that it was really hard for me personally to not have that gallows humor, right? Like, I know that it's probably inappropriate to make a joke about somebody having a cardiac arrest event. And I would never do that in mixed company. But now I'm watching people tear up and I'm watching people talk about how traumatic this is to watch this on television. And the one thing that just really stood out to me, and I said something to my wife, and of course everybody else in the room who was in our profession understood, this was a normal Monday for us. Like, nothing about this stood out as crazy or profound. I mean, yeah, it's a sports game and you don't normally see football players go into cardiac arrest, but for us, this was something that we deal with on a regular basis. And so I don't want to say that we're numb to it because we all know that we are, and that seems like an excuse, but I wasn't having the same reaction emotionally that everybody else in the room was having. And so as I looked on Facebook, I started seeing people post, oh my God, this is the most traumatic thing I've ever seen. And people were posting from the game, saying that they didn't know how they were going to be able to sleep tonight because they had to watch CPR be administered to Damar Hamlin. And the first thing that popped into my head after reading some of those comments was, think about the doctor who's going to have to go back to work tomorrow and go to the ER and work on the crackhead and the mother of 5 who had a stroke, and the homeless dude that came in with, an infected foot, or the EMS crew who transported Damar Hamlin to the hospital. And then 20 minutes later, they're probably running a call somewhere else in the city. And, I feel like we are really good at compartmentalizing things. We're really good at taking that information overload and suppressing it and just moving on. And so we know the boundaries. I mean, when people ask you when you're at a party and they say, well, what's the worst thing you've ever seen? And you go, I've seen a lot, but, I don't really talk about it. Or if you just want to get out of the conversation, you name the grossest, most effed up thing that you've ever seen in your life. And then they don't want to talk to you anymore. But for this situation, it's really bringing to light some of the effects that it had on the public. And I think it's going to change their perception of how they view us as first responders. The things that we take for granted as just normal, they're seeing now. They're seeing it firsthand. People are not meant to see some of the things that we see. That's not a normal occurrence. We're not meant as humans to see death and destruction and suffering. And so when they're watching football players from the other teams, and Damar Hamlin's team cry on national television and have that visceral response, that invokes an emotional response in them as well. And so when we were driving home, my wife turned to me and she goes, when we were sitting there watching this and, some of the wives were tearing up and people were kind of emotional. She goes, I remember looking over at you and you just had zero emotion. She goes, did that not bother you at all? And I said, no, it really, truly did not. And for the first time in a long time, I mean, we've talked about this. My wife's very understanding of the emotional toll that this job has taken on me. But for the first time in a long time, she reached over and she put her hand on mine and she said, I get it. I totally get it. She goes, I see how the first time you saw these things, it bothered you and it affected you. And I remember you coming home and not sleeping for a couple nights. And over time, I noticed that went away. And I understand now how you could become numb to that because it is shocking, but at the same time, it becomes the norm. And so for me, what I hope is going to come out of this is that the public will have a better perception of what we deal with on a day-to-day basis. I think we saw a little bit of a glimpse of it during COVID. We had people who were rooting for nursing staff and first responders. But just like after 9/11, that goes away. And so, unfortunately, this event is going to be the catalyst that I think will bring some of that back. Now, fortunately, as we have all learned today, Damar Hamlin is writing notes. I just read earlier that his first note was, "Did we win?" Which I hope is true because that's awesome if that is. But it sounds like he has a good neurological outcome. It sounds like he's going to survive. And so those are things that we can use as a win for emergency medical services, for first responders, for the physicians that were on scene. But also we need to make sure that we're getting the message out there about hands-only CPR and AEDs, and interacting with the community so that they understand that the things that they saw are things that we see on a daily basis. So on that same note, when we talk about the things that we see and the things that we deal with on a daily basis, there's no denying that we all have some level of mental health crisis that's going on within ourselves. I have reached out for help. I've gone to therapy several different times for different incidents that I've been on. But one of the things that I wanted to talk about was reaching out and understanding that there are lots of different options. So a lot of us have EAP through our employers. There are great organizations like Next Rung And there's individuals that go around and talk about this, like Dina Ali and several other people who are on the circuit that are going around and talking about mental health. So my favor to ask of you guys is, if you have issues, if you're struggling, if you're having problems, reach out. Don't wait until those things start to compile and become one bigger issue. There are a lot of places that can help you. There's a lot of people that would love to talk to you and help you get through this. And sometimes, we can do that with our crew. Sometimes we can do it with our family and our friends. But sometimes you need to reach out for professional help. So I'm going to put some links down in the description of this video, and I'll put it on the podcast link as well, with the information to get a hold of Next Rung and some other resources. But I wanted to thank you guys for, always supporting me. And this has been my outlet. So when I've been having a bad day, when I've been having a bad month, I know that I can go and I can do a podcast. Valor Fire Training can go and teach a class, and it helps refill my tank. So you're not alone. For those of you who I've spoken with, and there's been a lot, we were all having the same kind of response during this football game. We all realized that what we were seeing was nothing big to us, but it was definitely significant to the general public. So I want to thank you guys for taking time to listen to this episode, episode 1 of Back in Quarters. And moving forward, we're hoping that we're going to be able to put this out, once a week. And like I was talking about earlier, it won't always be me doing the podcast, but we want to thank you for taking time to listen to us and letting us be a part of your life. If you guys have any questions, or if there's something you'd like to see on the podcast, please send an email to david@valorfiretraining.com, or hit us up on Valor Fire Training on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, all the social media platforms. But until the next time we talk, take care, be safe, and we'll talk to you soon.